Israel's decline did not begin with open rebellion. It began with a compromise. Under King Ahab, the people still spoke of the Lord, yet they bowed willingly to the false god Baal. Altars to the God of Israel stood neglected, while foreign shrines multiplied across the land. At the center of this corruption stood Jezebel, Ahab's wife, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. She did not merely tolerate Baal worship. She enforced it. The prophets of the Lord were hunted down and killed, while others were forced into hiding. Into this darkness stepped Elijah the Tishbite. He appeared suddenly before King Ahab and spoke without fear. "As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." With that, the heavens were shut. Not by Elijah's power, but by the word of the Lord. After Elijah announced the drought to Ahab, his life was immediately in danger. He had confronted the king and challenged the nation's false worship. So God sent him away to protect him from Ahab and Jezebel. God hid him by the brook Cherith. There, as the land dried up, God sustained his prophet, and Elijah had to learn to depend on God. Ravens brought him bread and meat each morning and evening, and he drank from the brook until it dried up. When the brook dried up, God sent Elijah to Zarephath in Sidon, Jezebel's homeland. This showed that the Lord was not confined to Israel's borders and that mercy could be shown even where Baal was worshipped. It also quietly challenged Baal on his own ground. Baal was said to control rain and fertility, yet God sustained life where Baal was supposedly strongest. There, in the town of Zarephath, Elijah met a widow gathering sticks at the gate. The famine had reached its worst, and she was preparing what she believed would be her final meal. With only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug, she intended to cook for herself and her son, and then wait for death to take them both. Elijah asked her first for a drink of water, and then for a piece of bread. The request seemed impossible. She explained her poverty and her hopelessness. But Elijah told the woman not to be afraid, but to act in faith before fear. He instructed her to make a small loaf of bread for him first from what little she had, and only afterwards to prepare food for herself and her son. This was not a reckless sacrifice, but obedience to the word of the Lord. Elijah assured her that God would not fail her. The jar of flour would not be used up, and the jug of oil would not run dry, until the day the famine ended. Though she had almost nothing, the widow believed the word spoken to her. From that day on, her jar of flour never ran out, and her jug of oil never failed. Day after day, in the midst of famine, God quietly sustained them all. Sometime later, the widow's son fell gravely ill, and his breath left him. In her grief, she cried out, believing her loss was judgment upon her. Elijah carried the child to the upper room, laid him upon the bed, and stretched himself upon the boy. He cried to the Lord with urgency and sorrow, pleading for the child's life to return. And the Lord heard Elijah's prayer. The child revived and was restored to his mother alive. In a foreign land, among a people who worshipped other gods, the Lord revealed his compassion and power. He showed that he is the God who sustains life, hears the cry of the broken, and brings life where death seems final. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah again and told him to go back to the wicked King Ahab. As Elijah returned, he met Obadiah, a faithful servant in Ahab's court. Obadiah revealed that while Jezebel had been killing the prophets of the Lord, he had hidden 100 of them in caves and supplied them with food and water, proving to Elijah that God had preserved a remnant even in the darkest days. When Ahab finally saw Elijah, the king accused him. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah answered plainly, I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." Having spoken the truth plainly, Elijah did not argue further. Instead, he pressed the matter to its conclusion. The question of who truly ruled Israel could no longer remain hidden or delayed. Elijah therefore called for all Israel to be gathered together on Mount Carmel, along with the prophets of Baal, so that the matter might be settled openly before the nation and before God. There, before the nation, he spoke words that cut to the heart. "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." The people answered him not a word. So Elijah set a test, and the God who answered by fire would be acknowledged as God. First, the prophets of Baal were to sacrifice a bull, then call on Baal to consume the sacrifice by fire. They did so, and from morning until evening, the prophets of Baal cried out. They shouted. They leapt upon the altar. They cut themselves until blood flowed. But there was no voice, no answer, and no fire. Then, at the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah called the people near. He repaired the broken altar of the Lord using 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, and dug a trench around its base. He laid the sacrifice upon it and drenched it time after time with water until the trench overflowed. Then Elijah prayed. He did not shout. He did not plead at length. He asked that God would reveal himself, and that the people's hearts would be turned back again. As he prayed, a huge ball of fire descended from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and the water. Everything was burnt up. And when the people saw what had happened, they all fell on their faces in fear and reverence and cried out together, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elijah went up to the height of Mount Carmel with his servant beside him, the fire now spent and the land still dry beneath the silent sky. Bowing himself to the ground, Elijah prayed with quiet persistence, then lifted his head and sent his servant to look toward the sea. The servant went and scanned the distant horizon, but saw nothing, only the wide empty sky. In all, Elijah sent his servant 7 times to look for a sign as he waited in steady faith, trusting that the Lord who had answered by fire would also answer with rain. At last, on the 7th time, the servant saw it. A small cloud was rising from the sea, no bigger than a man's hand. Elijah knew the answer had come. He told the servant to run and warn Ahab, for the sky was already darkening and he was in danger. Clouds spread quickly across the heavens, the wind began to stir, and soon heavy rain fell upon the land. The long drought was broken, and the earth drank deeply once more at the command of the Lord. Baal was worshipped as the god of storms, the one who was said to command the clouds and send rain upon the land. If Baal were real, the drought should never have lasted, and the prophets who served him should have been able to call down both fire and rain. Yet on Mount Carmel, beneath a sky that had remained closed for years, their cries brought no answer. There was no fire from above and no gathering of clouds. When the Lord answered Elijah with fire, he showed that the power Baal claimed did not belong to him. But the victory on Carmel did not end the struggle. When Jezebel heard what had happened, she hardened her heart and sent word to Elijah, threatening his life. The prophet who had stood alone before a nation now fled in fear. He quickly went into the wilderness, eventually collapsing under a broom tree, and prayed that he might die. The Lord was not angry with him. Instead, he sent an angel to feed him and allowed him to rest. When Elijah had eaten and slept, the Lord did not hurry him back into danger or demand renewed courage at once. Strengthened in body and steadied in spirit, Elijah was sent on a long journey of 40 days and 40 nights, away from the noise of threat and triumph, until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There, far from kings and crowds, Elijah was finally able to speak freely. In the stillness of that sacred place, he poured out his heart before the Lord, convinced that he alone remained faithful and that his life's work had come to nothing. There, Elijah waited. The Lord invited him to stand at the entrance of the cave, and as he did, the power of creation passed before him. A great wind tore at the mountain, then the ground shook beneath his feet, and fire followed after. Yet in all of it, the Lord was not present. But when the noise had passed and the mountain grew still again, a gentle whisper was heard. In that quiet voice, God answered Elijah. He was not alone. The Lord was still at work, preserving a faithful remnant unseen. And so, strengthened by his experience, Elijah was given new direction and renewed purpose, and he was instructed to prepare the way for the one who would follow after him. With the Lord's word still echoing in his heart, Elijah left Horeb and returned to the land of Israel. The fear that had driven him into the wilderness no longer ruled him. God had spoken, and his purpose was clear. Elijah was not finished, and he was not alone. As he traveled north, he came upon a field where a man named Elisha was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Elijah did not speak at first. He simply passed by and cast his mantle upon him. Elisha understood the meaning at once. He left the plow, sacrificed the oxen, said farewell to his family, and followed Elijah. In this quiet moment, without fire or thunder, the Lord began preparing the next servant, ensuring that his work would continue beyond one man's life. Time passed, and Elijah continued his work, now with Elisha quietly learning at his side. Though fire had fallen and kings had been warned, the heart of Israel's rulers had not truly changed. In Jezreel there lived a man named Naboth, who owned a vineyard beside the palace of King Ahab. The land had belonged to Naboth's family for generations. When Ahab desired the vineyard, he offered Naboth money or another field in exchange. But Naboth refused, not out of stubbornness, but out of faithfulness. The land was his inheritance, given by the Lord, and it was not his to sell. Ahab returned to his palace angry and resentful. What he wanted had been denied, and his pride would not allow him to accept it. He lay down on his bed, turned his face away, and refused to eat, sulking like a child denied his will. Jezebel saw his bitterness and took control. She had little patience for restraint or reverence, and she scorned her husband's weakness. Where Ahab hesitated, she acted. Where he brooded, she plotted. With cold resolve, she devised a plan to take the vineyard by force, a plan that would silence Naboth and secure what the king desired, no matter the cost. Letters were written in Ahab's name and sealed with the royal seal, giving them the appearance of lawful authority. They were sent to the elders and nobles of the city, carrying orders that appeared righteous but were born of deceit. At Jezebel's command, false witnesses were arranged, men willing to trade truth for favor, and justice for reward. They were instructed to stand before the people and accuse Naboth of crimes he had never committed. To twist righteousness into rebellion, and loyalty into guilt. The charges were accepted. The judgment was swift. And Naboth was taken outside the city and put to death, condemned by false words and silenced by injustice. When Jezebel heard that Naboth was dead, she told Ahab to get out of bed and take possession of the vineyard. But the Lord had seen everything. God sent Elijah, now an old man, to meet Ahab in the vineyard Naboth had once owned. And whilst Ahab was inspecting his new vineyard, he saw Elijah approaching and said, "So Elijah, my enemy, you have found me." Elijah answered without hesitation, "I have found you, And because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, I will wipe out your descendants and cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. And also concerning Jezebel the Lord says, dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. For a while, Ahab did what had long seemed impossible. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and humbled himself. When God saw this, he delayed the full judgment, showing once more that mercy was offered even to the undeserving when there was humility. Elijah learned again that the Lord is not indifferent to injustice. He is the defender of the innocent and the keeper of covenant boundaries. Power does not excuse sin, and no crime is hidden from his sight. Ahab was wounded in battle, and though he tried to hide his injury, he died before evening. His blood flowed into the chariot, just as the word of the Lord had spoken. But Jezebel, even after what had happened to Ahab, remained unrepentant to the end. And shortly after, she was thrown from the palace window, and her body was trampled and eaten by dogs, just as Elijah had prophesied. After Ahab's death, his son became king over Israel. But like his parents, he did not turn to the Lord and instead worshipped false gods and did detestable things. And when he was injured in an accident and became seriously ill, he sent messengers to inquire of the priests of Baal whether he would recover. But the Lord sent Elijah to intercept them, and he met the messengers on the road and delivered the word of the Lord. You will not leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die. When the messengers returned, the king asked them to describe the man who had given them the message, and the king recognized the man as Elijah, the Tishbite. The king was so angry that he sent a captain with 50 soldiers to seize the prophet. They found Elijah sitting on a hill, and the captain shouted up to him, "Man of God," the king says, "come down." And Elijah answered, "If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." And so it happened, fire fell, and the captain and his men were consumed. A second group was sent, and the same thing happened. But when the third captain came with his soldiers, he acted differently. He fell on his knees and pleaded for mercy, asking that his life and his men be spared. This time, the angel of the Lord told Elijah to go with him. So Elijah went and stood before the king, repeating the same words as before, and the king died without having a son, precisely as the Lord had spoken. Soon after, the time came for Elijah to be taken away. Elijah and Elisha traveled together from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and finally to the river Jordan. At each place, Elijah told Elisha to remain behind. But every time Elisha refused to leave his master. When they reached the Jordan, Elijah struck the water with his mantle, and it parted so that they crossed on dry ground. On the far side, Elijah said, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha replied, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah told him, "You have asked a difficult thing, yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours, otherwise, it will not." As they walked on together speaking quietly, a chariot of fire and its horses appeared between them, and Elijah was taken away by a whirlwind. And in grief, Elisha shouted, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." But Elijah was gone, and Elisha saw him no more. Still grieving the loss of his master, he took hold of his garment and tore it in two. As he went back, he once again needed to cross the Jordan River, so he took the cloak of Elijah that he had left behind and struck the water as Elijah had done, and the waters parted. Then he knew that Elijah's spirit had been passed on to him as he had asked. Elijah did not die at this time, even though it is clear that he died at some point afterwards. He was taken from one place to another, just as Philip was later taken away after meeting the Ethiopian eunuch in the New Testament. His mission was complete. He had declared drought and rain, confronted kings and false gods, defended the innocent, and learned that God works through fire and silence alike. His life testified that the Lord alone is God, faithful to judge, ready to show mercy, and always able to carry his purpose forward through those who are willing to serve. Elijah's life showed that the Lord is never absent, even when his people wander. He is the God who shuts the heavens and opens them again, who answers by fire and speaks in a whisper, who confronts kings and comforts the weary. Elijah learned that faithfulness is not measured only in moments of power, but in obedience when hidden, perseverance when afraid, and trust when the work seems unfinished. God's purpose moved forward, carried on through another servant, proving that while men come and go, the word of the Lord stands forever. Elijah in the golden thread. God is supreme and unmatched. From Mount Carmel onward, Elijah's life declares that the Lord alone is God, sovereign over fire, rain, kings, and nations. Faithfulness can be lonely, but it is never unsupported. Elijah often stood alone before kings and crowds, yet God was always with him, giving him strength, help, and care. Human weakness does not cancel divine purpose. Elijah's fear, weariness, and despair in the wilderness reveal that God works through frail servants, strengthening them rather than discarding them. God governs history, not human authority. Through judgments on Ahab, Jezebel, and Ahaziah, Elijah's story shows that kings rule only under God's permission and accountability. God's work continues beyond one servant. Elijah's mantle passed to Elisha, teaching that God's purpose does not end with one life. His truth and power move forward through faithful successors. If you found this video interesting and would like to explore more, we have several options for you. One is our free, multilingual, Bible-based Christianity course, a free 30-lesson video course covering all aspects of the Bible and daily life. Another is the Bible by Stories, a series of over 50 videos that takes you on a journey from creation to the early church. And if you have questions about Scripture, there is a multilingual chat system on the website where you can ask any question on scriptural issues. To access any of them, simply visit the website listed below. If we don't yet have videos or the course in your language, please email us at the address shown, telling us what you are interested in and your language, and we will do our best to create them for you. God bless you on your walk to God's kingdom.